You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
Welcome to Breaking New Ground with our new guest, Sean Kelly Rand, who is Managing Director of REOREI Advisors in Boston. Hi, Sean. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
So as you guys can see or hear that John is not with us today, unfortunately. It's just going to be us, Sean. So thank you again. We really appreciate you joining us. And we also are just coming off our in-person event in Boston. Thank you to you and to REOREI Advisors for hosting our in real life meetup.
No, it was a pleasure. No, it was fun. I think we'll do more of them starting in September, right?
Yeah, that'll be great. So Sean, it's always interesting because I've seen you a lot and run into you a lot in Boston, but there's so much about you I'm sure I do not know. So I'm very interested in diving in and hearing more about your background. And I think our audience will be very interested in how you got to where you are, but also you cover so much ground of commercial real estate, from being an entrepreneur in Boston to lending money to looking at technology. So I think this conversation is going to be great. And we always start off with, how did you get to commercial real estate?
Through kind of family. So it's like very, very beginning, like I didn't come from, looking at a financial perspective or banking and then it wasn't a personal investment. It was, my dad was a carpenter growing up. And then in the, early 90s, late 80s, my mom became a real estate agent selling, foreclosed properties in Roxbury, Dorchester, and JP in Boston. And so from, working on carpentry projects with my dad to, working with my mother and probably far more influential on my mother's side because she was selling investment properties and, your triple deckers in kind of these urban neighborhoods. Well, that's what I decided I wanted to go into as a career. And then somehow by accident, I ended up in college and going into finance. And then through that, getting into, finance and then going back to business school and getting in finance and then doing real estate as kind of a corporate career. Because real estate is what I knew from just doing, like watching my dad swing a hammer and my mom sell homes. And so that kind of led to, real estate investment banking and financing, and then real estate ownership and private equity. And, and then how did I get overseas? Well, in order to pay the bills, my parents had foreign students that lived with us to help pay the rent, and they would learn English by living with a host family. But then they drew me overseas over to Europe. And so then through that, I ended up spending almost 10 years in Europe. And then I ended up buying real estate back in Boston in 2010 with my mother. And then eventually that grew into kind of a side business, which then, kind of led me to dealing with my current business partners, which are our family office, which then led me, in 2007 to setting up REOREI Advisors, which is a, real estate lending business. But it kind of like all comes together through those kind of like series of like, I don't want to say random, but kind of hapstance, situations.
Yeah, I love it so much. I didn't know any of that. And I might have talked about this with your brother, but I don't think I talked about it with you. But I started because my dad sold foreclosures in Buffalo. So it's a little bit different than the hot markets outside of Boston. And so when I was 18, I was selling foreclosures to investors and working with investors. And then, went to the corporate world. So it's really interesting. And because it's a family business, I think it would be great on another podcast if we could dive into how much you really learn from going to these houses, right, with your dad and with your mom. And it is pretty interesting, like the on the job learning, even when you're just a kid, like going through all of this, how much knowledge you can reuse when you're older and start doing it yourself. So we should definitely have an episode about that. But okay, so that is a lot, of course. Where do you want to start next? So do you want to talk about your going into finance, like working in corporate real estate? Do you want to dive right into RD advisors? Like, where do you want to go next? Because there is a lot.
I think we should also talk about the tech side of it, right? So,
Yeah.
all of a sudden we've met through the PropTech, and you're going, all right, well, now we went through this corporate, we've got this investment side, we're walking through foreclosed homes. Now all of a sudden we're talking PropTech. How do we get from foreclosed homes and swinging a hammer to PropTech, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the kind of the story of the industry is swinging hammers to now PropTech and FinTech. And for us, as a business and myself, it's, well, my business partner is a family office. They're heavily invested in tech. They're engineers. They are very much focused on the technology aspects of where we're going and where their investments. And I tend to deal with kind of the lending side, the boring side, that just don't lose it. But in the family office side, there's a lot going on, right? And they're engineers at heart. And my brother's an engineer. And so the engineering side, and even from my side, the finance side, and coming in, is you're always looking for an easier way to do something. You're doing something, you're going, hey, this is a repetitive task. Clearly, there's a better way to do it, because if I'm just clicking this button over and over again, like maybe I can automate it, right? If I'm just doing the same process over and over again, maybe I can automate it. So, okay, let's write down the process and let's figure out where in the process. And that even started for me early in my career. I long beyond it, I can no longer do it, but I programmed VBA. And I think I took a week, of work and compressed it into like seconds, because it was just like, oh, this is a repetitive process. Boom. And it can be done by VBA. And so, that PropTech space is interesting for us. And it's kind of, part of it is, so, my business is, I went from corporate side, then bought some real estate while I was in corporate, and I own that real estate portfolio with my family, which includes my brother and my mother. My dad is completely outside of it. My dad is, wants nothing to do with it. And then I have my lending business with my business partner, which is RD Advisors. And then I have kind of a PropTech. I would call it more, we've built software, and then we figured out in order to build software, it takes money. And in order to, it's easier to build it for other people other than just yourself, right? Because you need the economies of scale in order to pay for that software. And so instead of building software, you end up going down the path of, effectively creating a PropTech company, which, and that's kind of my evolution into kind of the PropTech space, is looking at these and saying, hey, this is interesting. We need this technology built, and either finding somebody else who's building it and saying, hey, can I help you build this because I need this product for me? Or then go and looking and saying, hey, should we not build this ourselves and then offer it to others? And I think in this case, my brother and I on a prop, which you'll be seeing it soon, it's Rapid REI, was software that we said, hey, wait a second, we're doing an investment process over and over again, that whether I'm doing it in my day job or I'm doing it in my side job looking at investment properties, how do we do this more efficiently? And then we started building the software and realizing that I don't really know anything about building software. My brother is an engineer, but he's learning about building software, bringing on engineers, and then finding somebody else, which is Christian, who I think you've met, who's built software, who's worked as kind of the business side of it in a true startup, and saying, hey, come join us, help us along the way, because we kind of figured out what we need to build, but we don't know how to build it for the masses, right? Come on here and help us build out this product. And so then that's kind of taken on a life of its own. And then I've kind of pulled myself out of it and said, hey, okay, I need to focus on the lending side. I'm going to be more of an advisor getting this started up. But that's kind of like this kind of evolution of how we got involved in the PropTech side, is we want to see products built that haven't been built because we need to use them, because we want to make our jobs more efficient. And I want to spend more time doing what I love and less time doing repetitive processes and paperwork, which I don't love.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked, because your answer was way better than I was expecting. And you're right. That is pretty much the evolution of PropTech, right? See a problem, find a solution. And I also have two things to say. One, less controversial than the other. One, that's kind of entrepreneurial just in general, right? That's the way your brain thinks. Where's an opportunity? How do I fix things? How do I make this better? right? That's one. And then I'll also say, which might be a little controversial, if you're working for a corporate company, some people might not care that they're spending a lot of manual time on someone else's dime, right? Like when you're an entrepreneur, you want things to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like I know one guy who built, it was funny, when I was at Intel, there was an engineer there who took his wife's job and he wrote a computer program to basically, it was kind of like accounting and financial analysis and reporting, but it was the same thing, repetitive. And I ended up chatting with him because I took the same thing that I was doing that was a week of work that was repetitive reporting, analysis, and Excel, and compressed it down to like literally like minutes as it was running through program. Well, he built the same thing for his wife's, his wife, because she was doing it. And he just looked over her shoulder and was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this isn't a job, right? This is like, like I could program this. And so he did. And they ended up firing her because like now she went, like they now have this computer program. And then what they ended up, he was laughing, it's like they ended up just basically hiring them on a contract to like provide the software, because like they decide then they take away the software, right? Like, all right, well, you can't run it, but it was funny that these efficiencies, and I talked with another guys at some big companies about building software, somebody at like Zillow, and I asked them about building what we wanted to build, a real estate investment software, and Zillow could do it. He goes, but they don't, there's such a big corporation that it's very hard, because who builds it? And does the person who's in any one seat want to take on the entrepreneurial task of building a software? Or what if that division gets cut, right? Like if you were a Zillow Mortgages or whatever Zillow was, or like, that division that they like start up and tried, and you were like, yeah, I'd like to do the cool new thing. And they're like, great. And then like 6 months later, they're like, sorry, you've decided to shut down the division. You were like, but hey, I've been with you guys for 10 years. Like, what happened to my role? It's like, no, you are now on that side of the house. You're like gone, right? And I think that's within big corporations. You're with the big corporation because you want that steady paycheck, not because, and you want that stability, right? Which is great. Like you're raising a family, or you have it, or you want a certain point in your career where you want the stability. You don't want that entrepreneurial risk. And so it makes it very hard to have those entrepreneurial people working within a big corporation. And I think you say the entrepreneurialness and those things are an entrepreneur coming out and being like, hey, I've got a problem. Guess who's going to solve it? Like, looking around the room for the person to solve it. And you're like, oh, that's me. That's me who's got to solve this. Okay, let's go figure it out.
Yeah. I think you're also highlighting a lot of issues with PropTech right now. One, there are a lot of people who work for large corporate real estate, REITs or, similar, who also don't want to raise their hand and adopt or pay for new technology, right? Like you're putting your job on the line right now if things are risky to begin with. So there's one issue. Another issue that I've seen, VCs really push startups in PropTech to, you have to go after the biggest companies and we need these big logos and we need all of this money because like you said, it's expensive to build. But there's this lacking of, entrepreneurs who are family office or single entrepreneurs, and there isn't a lot of software for them. And so it is really great to see more people and more entrepreneurs like you see a problem and say, this is what I need. How do I build it? Rather than a tech company, raising their hand saying, I think I can solve this problem, but let's go to the most expensive, biggest companies who right now, don't have time to adopt this. So I think, we need more people like you who can think this way and can build these teams. So right now, like how much do you want to talk about your software? I know it's not officially launched yet. Are you mostly managing it right now, or is it something like your day-to-day, something you want to dive more into right now?
Yeah. So, we can talk about, because we're kind of on a PropTech, build tech, podcast. I think we should chat about software. We should talk about PropTech. We should chat about those things. The day-to-day, I think we can talk about, really in terms of like me building software, like a lot of the credit goes to my business partner and RD Advisors, because he's an engineer. He's launched multiple PropTechs. He built the software for our own business. And so we are constantly, I tease him about it, and, on one hand, I hate it. On the other hand, I love it. But our entire team, I tell them like, we all need to get raises because we're doing our job and we're testing your software at the same time. So, at the same time we're running our business, we're also testing the software that is making our business more efficient. But there's a continual improvement, right? Because we built our own software and it's not external. There's a real-time turnaround in, hey, can this software that we've built, can it actually just export this, that we're looking at now and turn it into a report? Well, actually, yeah, that's pretty easy. Well, hey, can we do this one little calculation here? Oh my God, that is ridiculous because we don't have this data, then we're going to do this. And so the things that I think of might be easy are very hard. And the things that I think of would be like, well, you're going to generate this whole report and now we're going to have our loan docs, our entire loan docs print out. Well, that's easy, right? Those things are easy. And the things that I think of might be easy are very hard. And so, watching our, RD Advisors business transform through software and efficiencies, like we're really, I would say, a lead comes in to us printing loan docs to go there to us, taking payments through ACHs happens through a centralized software system, right? You're not entering data in once over here, once over here, once over here, once over here, right? It's really, you enter it in once and it flows through. And so you get the data validation, you have a single system, which I think has made a game changer for us in our efficiency and allows us to grow. And then, watching that in RD Advisors and then looking at what, historically investors that are buying triple deckers and single family homes are doing ourselves and saying, wait a second, my process of closing loans and managing a loan from the investor's standpoint isn't that different from buying a home and like running it as an investment. Like we can talk about like the PropTech software like AppFolio, which I think does a really good job on the property management side. But outside of that, like the level below when you're acquiring it, there's so many things that it's just like, you're a spreadsheet to then a Word document to then, then you're going back and forth in paper documents and PDFs. You're like, this is like, none of this matches. It's like lots of emails and entering and like, something you have in your model doesn't make it into your offer.
Exactly.
Right? And somehow you miss a translation. And so for us sitting back, and this is with my brother, Colin as well, looking at it and going, and this was for years, right? There's years of frustration before you come together and say, let's build some software around this, right? Yeah. And so we'd been chatting about it for years, just going, well, this is ridiculous. We're entering this into a spreadsheet and we're pulling data out and we're copying it. And it's like building a model out of stuff that's like, it's all publicly available and you can't get into the system, right? Like, this is just annoying, right? This is annoying. And you do it once, you do it twice, you've done it 100 times. And you're like, at some point in time, it would have been more efficient for me to build and pay for some sort of software at an hour. And my hourly rate that I think of as myself, my time is valued. Like, it's no longer worth it for me to do these things, right? And so why don't we build the software around it? And so then Colin and I came together and kind of building our own software, and we didn't have a name for it. It wasn't a startup. We sat down and just said, hey, we need to build this end-to-end solution for us. And, that you can go and look at a property and say, okay, I want to start building the model out here. I want that to dive right into the offer. Well, then can I send that same information to the insurance company? Can I send that same information to the investors? Can I send that same information to the bank? And all the reports, because you have one central model that's pulling all the data out of public information, pulling it out of the listing, pulling it out of MLS, right? Into a single place that then you can shoot it off into others where you're all working off the same data. And that, we started building that out for ourselves. And now, software is hard to build. Like, that's one thing I've learned, right? It's like, we'll just build this. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, where's your data come from? Okay, well, here's the data. And you're like, well, wait a second. The data doesn't fit, right? Oh, now you need to make the data fit in the system. And it's kind of like, maybe, I don't know if it's Schadenfreude, with my business partner, but like, if I was ripping into him about our own software, right? So, it's like, hey, why can't you just get it to do this, right? Like, why is this taking so long? Why is this? And all of a sudden now I'm building my own software and I tease, but it's brought me closer to my business partner who's more of a tech guy and I'm more the finance guy and more the real estate guy. And so, now we've had this like, you're like, nothing's funnier than, what do they say? I know a dog that laughed all winter at a porcupine that sat on a splinter, right? Like, it's here I am building software And it's that painful experience that is having me learn more about building software. And that's part of the reason we did it. Is now when we can look at somebody else who's doing a startup, and whether or not our software ever takes off as its own company, us building it and the amount that we're learning from building that software is so valuable to then looking at the environment of what's else out there and using the software and asking the questions. Where is the data source? Where's the data validation? Okay, API, right? Knowing these things. All right, we're now talking about AI, right? And integrating AI into our business. And we have an argument with one of our partners about how valuable AI is and whether we want to use AI, right? And, I battle back and forth with Colin and Christian about what AI can do and what it can't do, right? Like, I'm not a fan of AI, right? I don't think it's there yet. I don't think it can do all the things that you think it can do, and it's returning the wrong answers, right? So it does a lot of great things, but it gets I come from a world of finance and regulation where you can't be 99% correct. You have to be 100% correct, and there's litigation. And so when you get into AI and you lose control over it, you have to be able to control that AI, right? You have to control, and you've got to make sure that it's delivering you the answers to the questions that you asked, not to the questions that it thinks you asked, right? And so there's all sorts of boundaries on there that kind of make me feel that AI, it's not quite there. But it's those discussions and diving into those and having those debates and having those, real, show me I'm wrong, type things. When you get and you learn so much about the product, because you're not just looking at it and reading an article about it, but you're going through it in a real life experience. And you're putting your own money on the line and going through it and building a software around AI and tools around AIs. And then you have to talk about, a data set, right? And so then you take this in on your own, and now you're watching what these big companies are doing with it. And all of a sudden you understand the universe a little bit better of the business world around you and what it's capable of and what it's not, because you're doing it. And so I think there's a value, and this is kind of to, any PropTech founder or anybody out there thinking about it, is there is a value to being an entrepreneur. So I think there's a certain entrepreneurial mindset that you have to learn about, driving business. You can be really good at something, but you have to do sales. You have to do everything. And I think there's also a mindset of being a PropTech entrepreneur or building software. There's a completely different mindset. You need to go out and building a software. It's an experience in and of itself that has value, whether or not the company you build ever becomes a super successful company. And I hope, that Rapid REI becomes super successful because Christian and Colin are vested in it and I'm vested in it. But at the end of the day, the real value in some sense is actually building it and doing it.
Yeah, those are amazing points. A lot of our audience are commercial real estate entrepreneurs who are investors or developers. So I've never heard that point said before. So I think that's amazing. We do need more people to realize, you just putting it into numbers of, okay, think of all the due diligence I've done, right? Let's just use that for an example. How many past years? And then, like you said, then take the number that my hours were, and you could either go build your software, or like you said, you could go buy it and then adopt it. And it probably still will be cheaper than, continuing to do these tasks in such a slow manner. Because a lot of our audience are entrepreneurs starting their own investments, a lot of them, like John, like other people that we've had on the podcast, a lot of them have gone from these working at large real estate offices and now started their own development and started their own investment. So can you speak to a little bit more of what your software does and the efficiencies for someone who's going through due diligence, looking to buy, looking to acquire, and then what does your software do that's efficient for them?
Yeah, and the software, let's be clear where we are in the process and as we go, what it will do and where it is now. Right today, it's
I'm already selling your software. Come on, Sean, it's already there.
It's launched. Yeah, Colin and Christian will launch it to you, right? And part of it is my role within all this and where do I fit, right? My day job is running a business and on the lending side, and then saying, hey, we ought to build this software, right? And guys, figure it out and come to me. And I'm the one hammering away saying this is what we should do, but I'm not the one sitting down with the programmers saying, okay, we got to build this and do it, going through the Figmas. And, so I report back on these things that they're the headlines, but I'm not diving into the news story. And like Christian and Colin are in this, in the weeds and the details every day and learning about, the code and going through the code, right? Like I'm at the 10,000 feet going, okay, here's the environment of where PropTechs are. Here's the software that's provided. Here's what's on the market. What I'm seeing, and this is, and I'll pitch to my team and I'll go and I'll say, hey, look, here's what I find is missing. We've closed over 350 loans, probably 300 loans in the past 4 years, right? Or thereabouts with the real estate lending business. We've bought, dozens and dozens of units of housing in the Boston area. We've looked at probably hundreds and, probably if not hundreds and hundreds of potential, multifamily investments in the Boston area. We also went to Detroit. We went to Baltimore. We went to other markets. We're constantly looking everywhere, right? Building a model for each one, or even filling out your model is a pain in the ass. It takes time. Then you want to fill out an offer. And what I realize is my clients on my borrower clients and then my peers in the real estate investment world, we don't have a lot of time. We're not always in front of our desks, right? So, hey, I'll get to that when I get home. That deal is gone. So if you can't pull it up, do it on your phone and figure out the investment analysis on your phone and send an offer off your phone, you're out of the game, right? Especially in a competitive market. So the software building is, hey, being able to go, think about it, you show up and, I think you've seen a preview of the software. You're going to an auction and you're standing at an auction and you're going, hey, what should I bid on? And before it was, hey, I'm sitting at the computer, Colin's at the auction, he's calling back and saying, hey, I think it needs, 150 grand of work and I think we can sell it for 700, right? And I'm there updating a model and it's like, all right. And you're live bidding. Why don't you just be on your phone, enter those numbers into there. You're pulling all the data, public data into there. You're building your model automatically. It's running it. And you're like, okay, if I can sell it for 700, it's going to cost me $150,000 to do it. Pull it into my model, which I built, my investor model, and they're fairly standard, right? What can I pay? And I can update that at the auction, right? I can walk around and say, it's still a guesstimate, right? You're not going to get everything right, but can I do that part of it, right? There's so many things that have to go around where it's like, my brother and I were discussing, I went to go see a building and it's like, I thought it was a great investment, but then I walked in and realized it's only 14 feet wide. Well, it changed my whole analysis because at 14 feet wide, I can't have two side-by-side buildings. It's deep versus wide, right? But that was, but being able to do everything on the fly. And then now you've got the model in the system. Okay, what else will you need to do? We need to send an offer. Okay, before I would say, hey, let's pull up our Word document. Let's fill it out, send it. Well, it's kind of repetitive. Like we already have a standard offer form. Why don't you just click, fill in the offer? And then I can go check. Here's the, is it contingent on financing? Okay, fill in my financing contingency standard. Is it contingent on inspection? Yes or no? Hey, here's 5 or 6 line items that it's contingent to. Can I add those line items or is there nothing, right? And it makes it really simple because everything's kind of standardized. Just fill out a standardized document. You kind of go, well, why didn't that exist? But now you're doing it on your phone, on the go. You're sitting in your pickup truck and you're bidding on it, or you're sending in an offer while you're there, and everybody else needs to go home and run their models, then pull together an offer, then call somebody, and you're pulling in, and then they're looking, all those things where it's like, hey, we've got a standardized process, right? We're running through and you're like, hey, I need you to look up the registry of deeds, and then I need you to look up this, and then I need you to do this, and then that. It's like, no. I need that stuff yesterday. That time, then you're like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Okay, if you're only buying one, it's not a big deal. But when we were buying, I must have analyzed every single property back in 2010, 2014 that was on market or coming to market or we heard about. Every single one. We had a spreadsheet with hundreds of potential investment properties. We were doing it on a daily basis. So when the investment opportunities arise, when you're slow, and so, it's about, that's why we had the name Rapid, right? Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get to, we're trying to make it much quicker, right? And it's not, people talk about putting things on the blockchain and all that, and I get it, but you still need to analyze it. And it's still a physical property, right? You got to go visit it. But so it has to be able to be done off your phone. You have to be able to, and then you have to be able to share that analysis, right? So you do it, and then it's got to be shared with me, right? And then, by the way, if you're already sharing it with somebody, well, then share it with your insurance agent, right? So
Yeah.
your insurance is pricing off a model. Well, build their model into it. And so it's about taking all of that information, pulling it in there, and making it really easy to do that portion of the real estate investment side. Because there's a lot of other really hard portions, right? That take a lot of experience and expertise, right? So let's give the time back to the contractor or the builder who's going out on site to figure out what he needs to pay for, because he's an expert on that. He's not an expert on running an Excel model. Well, let's put that, take that away, make that super easy so we can focus on getting the bid process right? And then, put those things so it makes it really easy to go through that process to get something under contract. Once you have it under contract, my view is then once you have it under contract, then you have a long period of time because you've narrowed it down to one, right? But I need to analyze 100 deals to get one under contract. Once I have it under contract, I don't need the process to be as inefficient because I'm only buying one. But I'm not saying it can't be efficient, right? We should do it. But if you're going to analyze hundreds, you need that process where you analyze hundreds and put in loads of offers to be really efficient. Because, in one sense, if you step back and you look at it for a broad sense, you go, hey, you know what? There's probably a good deal out there. So let's take the whole market. And if you want a really good deal, take the whole market, figure out what every single house in the market is worth, and put an offer at your bid price, low ball offer on every single house in the market. And you go, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you just put a bid on every single house in the market? You're like, oh, because it's a pain in the ass to do that. Okay, let's make it not a pain in the ass. So now it's easy to put in bid on every single property on the market. You can put a low ball bid in. And if something hits, it hits. And so you're like, oh, okay. Now I have to build the software to enable that. Now I've got a competitive advantage, right? And so it's about building that software to give yourselves and your investors and your clients a competitive advantage. And so that's the software we're building. And then you go and you take AI as part of that, and it's figuring out, what are your real costs? What are your real things? How do you ask questions? What data sets do you work off of? And is there a way to identify investments where you are an individual no longer doing it, but AI is effectively taking that, ingesting all that proprietary information you have, and then analyzing? Okay, well now AI knows how you analyze each investment. Can it learn off of that and then apply your metrics to buying a property and figure it out? Can it then figure out new markets? Hey, if you're interested in this, you might be interested in this type of thing. And that's where it gets interesting. I think it's far more complicated than it's alluded to. But so anyway, so that's kind of the things that are going on with it.
Yeah, that's so impressive. Also, a lot of people will tell me they have investment software and it's like, okay, but what exactly does it do? And so your example of the auction, I think anybody in any real estate investor can very much picture that. And they do know that, how much manual work have you done in the market? And then where did all that information go? And where did all that due diligence go? And all those comps and all those tax information. And like you said, to be able to do that rapidly, I have not heard anybody bring that up, but that is so true. And in a competitive market, that's going to be a game changer for sure. So that does make sense. And then the marketing name, that all makes sense. I definitely think our audience of commercial real estate investors will want to know more, especially with the launch. So we'll share that with them when you're ready. But I do also want to leave PropTech for a little bit and talk about your lending business, because that also will be a great benefit to a lot of listeners. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what RD Advisors is lending right now? Maybe some of your unique products or service. I think it'd be a great time because finding money can be hard right now.
Yeah, no, real estate, we're a real estate private lender. We started up in 2017 and we looked at it from two sides, right? So from the supply side, right? From the investor standpoint, what do the investors need? And what are the demand side? What are the demand, I guess the two demand side, what are the demand of the investors and the demand of the builders and the owners and operators that are our clients. And so in 2017, my partner and I, we'd already bought a bunch of properties. We'd kind of gone through the cycle. In 2017, we're like, hey, I don't know if we want to be on the equity side anymore. If we're going to build a business and we're going to go the distance on it, and we're going to pick kind of like a theme to go on, we want to get a hell of a lot more defensive, right? That's we felt we were on the offensive for, we took on a lot of risk between 2010 and 2017. And now going forward, one of the things, you don't know when the cycles are going to turn. And this is kind of my Lehman Brothers experience. Like I was there, from 06 to 08. And one of the things people got wrong is, and everybody wants to go back in hindsight, it was all obvious. Go read the newspaper articles from 2008. Go read them. Go look at the headlines. People were still in bidding wars trying to buy properties in 2008. And, you're looking at it. And so I think what people forget from that experience is how quickly it snuck up that the world changed like this, that we went from 2006, 2007 to 2008. And so what we decide for our own capital, this is my capital, my partner's capital, and our investors' capital, is we need to get defensive, and we need to get defensive early. And how do we get defensive? Well, you switch from being the equity side to the debt side. And if you're going to go in debt, where do you go in the capital stack? You don't go in mezz, pref equity, you go straight to senior, right? Because that's the most defensive place you can be in the capital stack, essentially. And so, and then you want to diversify it, and then you want to stay in a market, So, from the investor's standpoint, we wanted to be in the greater Boston area because it's a strong economy. We feel it's diversified, and it's probably going to weather a storm better than other markets. We'll see, right? It's also got very favorable lender laws because it's non-judicial. So I think that's something from an investor standpoint we want to stay on. So we want to protect our investors' capital, and then we want to provide interest income, which is more distributions to investors as opposed to capital gains. So focus on that steadier, stabler portion. So that's the investor story. The demand story is, hey, one of the things, again, coming out of Lehman, people didn't realize is the availability of capital matters more than the cost of capital. And so when there's plenty of capital in the market, so we think about, coming out of the pandemic when the Fed, flushed the market full of capital and cheap capital. Well, people do dumb deals. It's not a fun time to operate as a lender because you're just trying to keep yourself out of trouble and keep your clients out of trouble because there's so much money and everybody thinks there'll be so much money. The reverse is when all that money comes back out of the system, then people stop asking about the cost of capital and they ask about the availability of capital, right? And so is capital available for this transaction? And it's no longer about competing with another lender, competing with the bank. It's about providing capital where it is need. And there's all sorts of needs to capital. And so from our client side, one of the things we do to provide is all we do is we're a pure real estate lender. We don't do all sorts of things. We're not a bank. We don't take deposits. We're not selling you a checking account. We're not trying to get you a consumer loan. Every day, all day, we do real estate loans. And so that we're a sharpshooter. And all day, every day, we do real estate loans. At least the vast majority, 90% plus, are in the greater Boston area. So then we're saying, okay, we're a pure play in this. We do this thing really, really, really well. Well, that means that we can do it very efficiently and very fast. And so the same analogy when you're sitting at an auction, you found a good property or an auction, you're in a estate sale, you want to buy a property, or you are in downtown Boston and there's an office building for sale. And you can go to the owner and say, hey, I'm going to close in 60 days, subject to financing to my bank and all this. Or you can say, hey, I've already sorted it out with my lender. I'm going to close in 10 days. What offer do you think is going to get accepted? And which one can offer a lower price, right? Yeah. The offer that can close fast and efficiently is going to win that bid in most cases. And so if I can enable my clients to win more transactions and win the better transactions at a lower cost, then they're not going to ask me about my cost of capital because they can refinance me out. They can go get a bank loan. They're going to ask me about my performance. Can you close? How quickly can you close? And how much can you lend? And so then we're answering a different set of questions. And I think what we get and we find in our business is it's a lot of repeat clients because once they get used to using us and figure out how our financing impacts their ability to close more transactions, get more deals done, then one of two things. One, they're using it on their next transaction. And two, they're saying to their friends, hey, you should chat with Sean about your next transaction. He can get this done. And so it's about getting the word out there. So it's kind of a bit about our lending business.
everyone uses the name advisor, but just from what I know of you, and I'm sure everyone can pick up just from hearing you speak, like you are a great advisor and you are a trusted advisor and you've been in the market and will be in the market. This has also been a really great story, especially from someone so young, of like the entrepreneurial journey, right? And you being able to look at trends and look at the numbers, and no one can predict. And of course, looking back is always easy, but having lived through it and your movement from from equity to debt to PropTech is just like so interesting and amazing. And I know people will want to connect with you and RD advisors after this call. So we'll make sure to add all of that and, make sure the marketing machine is working. Before I ask you our last question about trends in 2024, is there anything else you want to cover that we didn't?
I think we capture it. We can go to trends in 2024 and we can always follow up.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be a tough question. We don't want to put on rose-colored glasses, but we also want to show there are opportunities in the market for entrepreneurs. So what are you excited about in 2024?
Excited about. So I think the opportunities, I think now has probably been one of, and I think 2024, we're halfway through it, right? So we're at the midpoint. We're more than halfway through 2024. So looking at, what are the opportunities in 2024? I think that extends into 2024, 2025, right? When we're looking 12 months out. I think it's a very exciting time, right? Like, so there's been so much capital in the system that the value of everything has been so high that people haven't been selective. Yeah. And so it's been very, capital's creeped into every corner and caused prices to expand, which meant there's fewer and fewer opportunities for somebody that's looking to buy, and find an outsized return on it. And so what I'm excited about now is I'm starting to see a bifurcation, right? So you have your residential market is still super expensive, but your commercial market is now getting really cheap. And some of that is really cheap for a reason, right? And some of it is just cheap because everything else is cheap and people can't figure out where the value is. And I think that's where it gets really exciting, is when you have a market where, office buildings are getting decimated. Well, some office buildings should be decimated in value because you're relying on office tenants to fill them up. Other ones might be conversion opportunities. Other ones might be conversion opportunities to cheaper office. That's still a great investment. But now there's these opportunities where there's some things in the market that are trading very cheap that somebody's going to be able to figure out. Some entrepreneur is going to be able to figure out, and they're going to be able to do something with it because they bought it at a low enough price that they can do something really creative that I haven't thought about or you haven't thought about. That is going to make, them, a bucket, hopefully a bucket load of money for taking a certain amount of risk doing this. And so that's where it gets interesting, is that you finally have these cracks opening up where there's interesting investment opportunities for the entrepreneurs that want to get started. Whereas before it was, like every big firm was buying everything, right? And there was just no room to get started. And now I think that's exciting.
Yeah, Sean, I couldn't have written this better. I just give you a little prompt and you just like take it perfectly. That's the thing we want to showcase, are all these people that there were these huge barriers to entry. It was just safer to stay within your, big salary with a commercial real estate. But now is this really cool opportunity of people who are creative and are going to, do things on like a neighborhood level or one-on-one level and not have to answer to REIT practices or to investors, maybe a couple investors, but it does provide like this exciting, like, what can we do that isn't always have to be the way it's always been done? So that was like an amazing answer.
And I would also say, as people are getting into this and we're entering the period of market where people, whether it's PropTech or real estate or brokerage, where people are getting laid off. Right? It's inevitability. You're going to go through a cycle. And I think a lot of people are going like, it's the end of the world. It's all over, or you have a startup fail or a business that just didn't work out and you just start over again. And I will say, I came out of Lehman, right? When I came out of Lehman, it wasn't like there was a job to interview. I went on interviews. By the time I arrived to the interview, because the interview, let's say, was scheduled 2 months or after the summer, I showed up to an interview where the entire team I was supposed to be interviewing with was fired. Like the secretary was like, "Who are you here to see? They don't work here anymore." Like that division does not exist, right? Like I had literally had meetings scheduled that were like that. it wasn't like jobs were lost. It was like companies and industries were lost, right? Like it was just gone. And so you were in this barren field of like trying to find a job when there just weren't anybody hiring. And so what do? You become an entrepreneur and you go out and you look and you try to get something going. And at that time, I tried to go out and buy. I started calling. You're dialing for dollars, but you have to learn how to generate business as opposed to find a job. And what you find is, okay, well, you can have multiple clients. You can only have one job in some sense, but you can have multiple clients, and you can build a business, and it takes time, and you can invest in it. But I think it's that, sometimes one good thing about a downturn and a recession is it forces people to get creative that otherwise wouldn't have taken that risk, but could be really, really good in creating their own business. And I think you have a lot of entrepreneurs that started out of, kind of the global financial crisis, that started their own companies, that are big companies today, but never would have gotten started if they had just kept on this really cushy, role. And so I think you're going to see a lot more people that have to go out there. And I think that even if you have an entrepreneurial journey and then you go back to work for a big corporate,
completely,
that experience changes you and makes you, it's going to take you, level you up, take you to that next level of your career in general.
Yeah, I want to encourage everyone. Like you said, maybe you're not meant to be an entrepreneur, but one, try it. Also, two things I think everyone in commercial real estate should work on right now is you have time, probably, right? Like deals aren't flowing necessarily, or, maybe you're job searching, but two things I want everyone, I think, to spend a little time on is look at marketing, right? Like if you were a broker and you always relied on your emails being sent by your marketing team, and now business is slow, work on getting on Twitter, work on, seeing what Bob Knackel's doing, see what other people are doing. And then also technology, start adapting technology, start using ChatGPT. And maybe a couple of years from now, you're back working for a big cushy firm and no biggie. But like you said, you just learn so much going through those processes. And 100%, like this is really why we have the podcast is, I worked for a development firm that 100% the partners came out of a company that had closed its Northeast offices, and then also only started this now huge development company because projects had stalled, and they picked them up at a very low cost of doing business. And so I'm really happy you brought all of this up, and we do want to encourage everyone here. And I hope people reach out to you, one, to learn so much from you, and then also to use these services. You seem like a really great partner. We're a big fan of RD Advisors, and we can't wait for the software launch.
Yeah, me either. Right? I keep yelling at my guys, where is the builder? They're like, yeah, Sean, you can't just like click a button and have software. You got to build it and all these things. And that's one thing, on that topic for Rapid REI, we are looking for, people to collaborate with, to bring on. We are looking for experience. And I think there's things that, you have to recognize you don't have experience. I don't have experience launching software, right? And so, the same thing as people don't have experience going and doing their first development or financing it. I think we have to recognize also we need those advisors and those people that are interested on the tech side, which is where I lack. I just don't have it, right? And I can kind of get it and I understand parts about it. But, we're looking back and saying, okay, do we want to have something that we can roll out massively? I think we need to bring on partners onto that. And so I'd encourage anybody who's interested in it to reach out to me, message me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and then let's have the conversation on it. And, I'd put you in touch with Colin and Christian, who are far more, in-depth diving into the details on it, that can have that conversation on it.
Yeah, just like your meetups and then also our meetups together, like we want to bring a community together of resources. So whether that resource is, let me introduce you to this software that's going to make your life easier, or let me introduce you to this fractional CMO or fractional accountant, or, like you said, you need a lot of partners when you go out and do this on your own, and you have to realize that you can't do it all. So we are so happy, Sean, that one, that you're our guest on our podcast, and two, that you're a great partner to people out there, and that, we're building a little community in real life off the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. This is great. It's fun.
Yeah, thanks,
I look
Sean.
forward to our
Thank you
next,
so much.
we'll have to figure out our next date we're doing for our in-person meetup. So
Yeah, and then we'll let everyone know. Thank you.
We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.